Hey everyone, this is Dr. Earl, founder and executive director of Therapy for Black Kids. I want to start off by welcoming all of you today to this live event to discuss managing behavior problems in kids. And before I get started, I also want to invite you to share where you are watching from today. I will save the video, so if you're not able to watch the entire live today, definitely feel free to come back to watch the recording and also share the video with others that you think may find this information helpful. So again, today we're going to be talking about managing behavior problems in kids. This is not intended to be, a therapy session. It's really providing you some information to help you understand what are some of the factors that may contribute to behavior problems in kids, but also what are some of the things that you can be able to do as a parent to be able to manage and improve some of those problems that may be occurring in your child, specifically given some of the challenges related to the pandemic and how children may be exhibiting some behavior difficulties as a result of life stressors that they may be experiencing individually or that they may be experiencing as a family. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you today. Again, as you join, comment to let me know where you're watching from, if you feel inclined to do so. Also share if you are a parent or if you are a therapist, a counselor, or even a student that is working with kids. So I have a couple of things that I wanted to talk about today. And so before I get into all of that, I wanted to just sort of share a little bit more about my own background and why I also started Therapy for Black Kids. So I am a licensed psychologist. I've been licensed for about 10 to 11 years now, and have over 15 years of experience working with children and families. Right now, I'm primarily serving as a professor in Los Angeles, where I teach students who are interested in becoming counselors and therapists and psychologists. And so that's where I spend the majority of my time. And then recently, I have stepped out into this new journey to add something else on my plate, which is Therapy for Black Kids, which is a resource to help parents to develop healthy kids. And the main focus of Therapy for Black Kids is really to provide information and resources to parents. In the future, there will also be more live events for parents to discuss different issues around mental health, as well as being able to offer some opportunities for children and teenagers to be able to participate in events where they can also learn about mental health themselves and what are some of the things that they can be able to do to help them cope with things that go on. So we know that kids experience stress just as much as adults, and sometimes it can be challenging to understand, as a parent, how can you help your child that may be experiencing these difficulties? Obviously, therapy can be one avenue or way that a child can get some help, and that you can also learn some tools that can help you assist your child with managing some of the difficulties that they may be experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So that is the reason why I started Therapy for Black Kids. And if you are not familiar with the website, definitely check it out. There is the link to access the website on the YouTube page. And you can also visit therapyforblackkids.org on the internet, and it'll take you to the website where you can learn a little bit more about my expertise and my work, as well as some of the resources that are already available there. So if you are interested in some specific types of resources, or you want, events that are specific on a topic, definitely reach out to us. You can email us at therapyforblackkids@gmail.com, and either myself or someone else on the team will be able to make a note of that, and then we can be able to program some of those additional activities that may also be helpful for you as well. So, again, I want to thank you all for tuning in today. Definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel and share the video to those that you feel the resources and information may be helpful that I discussed today. So, um, as we get started, I want to definitely mention to you that if you have questions about some of the things that I discussed, write them down, make a little note for yourself, and feel free to also add them into the chat box. But I will try to save some time toward the end of this. My goal is not to take up a lot of your Saturday morning and afternoon, but to really just sort of take a couple of minutes to share some information. And again, this can be something that you can refer back to later, just as a refresher in terms of the information that I will be discussing today. So, the first thing that I really wanted to talk about is, as a psychologist, we are aware that there are a number of things that might influence a child's behavior. And so I wanted to briefly sort of talk about that with you today, just so that you can get a sense about how it's not always your sort of actions as a parent that dictate whether your child is going to exhibit behavior problems, or whether they're going to be able to, whether your actions are going to contribute to some of these negative outcomes with your child. But there can be ways that you can behave that can contribute to reducing and even improving some of those behavior issues. And so what I'm going to share with you is something that we refer to as the ABCs of behavior. And so you'll see that here listed. And ABCs refer to antecedents, behavior, and consequences. So antecedents are what has led up to this behavior. There can be a lot of different types of antecedents. One of those antecedents, obviously, is if your child maybe wants to get a favorite toy, they want a piece of candy, they want to go play, they want to watch a certain show on television, they maybe don't want to clean their room. And so when you may give them those requests to engage in a certain thing or to not engage in a particular action, that is going to contribute to the B, which is the behavior. And so that may include a variety of things. For young children, we know that they may exhibit temper tantrums, when they can't get their way. Kids may exhibit aggression. They can exhibit non-compliance or not follow directions when you tell them things to do. And so all of those are some potential things that may occur after those antecedents. And then the C is for consequences. And so these are the actions or steps that you take after that specific behavior occurs. And so, as I talked about earlier, in terms of consequences, those can be the things that you do that can help to reduce the likelihood that these negative behaviors may occur in the future, or ways that you can reduce these behaviors occurring in specific settings as well. And so what I wanted to do today is just offer a couple of tips. I'm going to try to go over maybe 4 tips of things that you should consider in terms of helping to reduce behavior problems in kids. And so I want to talk a little bit more specifically about antecedents, and really sharing, when we talk about antecedents, what are some of the factors or types of antecedents that might contribute to behavior problems. And so, as a psychologist, there are multiple things that may contribute to antecedents. And so, if you give me a second, I'm going to switch over to a different diagram that I want to be able to discuss with you. So, what I'm going to pull up is a diagram that talks about different types of antecedents that may contribute to some behavior difficulties in kids. And obviously, each child is different. There are multiple antecedents that may contribute to behavior issues. And so I think that it's really important that we talk about these different types of antecedents, because oftentimes for parents, I think we don't always consider that there may be things within, let's say, the school system that may be contributing to why these behavior problems may occur. There may be biological factors that contribute to this, as well as thinking about factors within the family, obviously. So we know that sometimes there are issues with siblings. And if you were an only child and then maybe you have another baby that's on the way, then that child begins to have some behavior issues as a result of that. So this is just a list of a couple of different antecedents that may contribute to behavior problems. And as you'll see here, there are several of those. I won't go through all of these in detail because I do want to make sure that there is time for me to again answer some questions at the end that may be helpful for you in terms of ways to sort of manage some concerns that you may have experienced in the past. But I want to just briefly talk about some of these biological factors here. So when we talk about biological factors, obviously genetics plays a role in some of these behavior issues. Brain development or brain damage, or if a child has had difficulties early in childhood, maybe they fell and hit their head, maybe there was some difficulties with pregnancy that may contribute to brain development. We also know that some children can be just difficult, and so temperament also influences behavior difficulties as well. Physical illnesses may contribute to that, so kids that may have a chronic illness may be at a higher risk of exhibiting behavior issues. And then the other thing that is not sort of listed here that I want to sort of talk about is mental health difficulties. And so children that may have diagnoses like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD may be more likely to exhibit some behavior issues in terms of hyperactivity or difficulties following directions. And so I think it's important for parents to really recognize that there are those types of things that may also contribute to behavior problems. Some of the school challenges that are listed here at the very top of this figure. So children may have academic difficulties, and what we know from research is that sometimes when children are struggling, maybe they don't understand the material that the teacher is discussing, maybe they have some learning challenges, and as a way of sort of expressing their frustration, they may decide not to do classwork, or they may decide to be disruptive or make jokes to sort of pull the attention away from some of their school challenges. And so those are some things that may also come up for children as well. And then I mentioned briefly in terms of some of the family factors that may contribute to behavior problems. So thinking about parents or families that may be experiencing divorce. We know from the research that one of the things that happens is that when there is a change in terms of the structure of the family, children may engage in behavior difficulties. And so we oftentimes see that when parents separate, if they remarry, that there can be issues that occur in terms of the child's behavior difficulties. And then just to sort of lastly list, on here, it talks about some social or demographic factors. And so we can think about for young mothers, maybe there is challenges with managing behavior difficulties because of lack of experience with sort of understanding those things. And so those are just a couple of factors that may also contribute to behavior difficulties. So as I discussed before, these are just a couple of the types of antecedents that may contribute to behavior problems. And so it's important to sort of keep in mind that there are numerous things that may contribute to these behavior issues. And obviously, if you want to get some assistance with understanding like what may be some of the specific antecedents for your child, then obviously as a psychologist, I would recommend that you contact a local licensed therapist, psychologist, or child counselor that can be able to work with you to help you understand what are some of these specific things that may be contributing to the concerns that you may be seeing with your child. So I'm going to, as I'm watching the time, go ahead and start to discuss some of the tips that I wanted to mention. And the first tip that I wanted to talk about really does also fit within the antecedents sort of area. And so these are things that you can work on managing that may sort of help reduce your problems. And that is talking about sleep difficulties in children and how does sleep impact the child's mood and behavior. And so what's noted here on this figure is a graph that shows the recommended hours of sleep for a child based upon their age. And this is some data from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. And so you can see that there's a range of how much time or how long a child should sleep. And you can sort of think for yourself, on an average night, how much time does your child sleep? And maybe think about how does that impact your child's mood and your child's behavior. And so if we look at sort of this central area, again, maybe kids from 1 up until about 12, you can see that kids may need anywhere between 9 to 14 hours on average. So that is a significant amount of time. And I can imagine that for many families, their child probably doesn't sleep this much time, which is important, not only to their mood and behavior, but also to their growth and development. And so I wanted to reference this because I do think that it is helpful for parents to really recognize the impact that sleep plays on the child's mood and behavior. And you can sort of connect this to your own sort of mood as well, in that when you maybe don't sleep as much as you would like, that you tend to be more sort of irritable or sort of on edge throughout the day. And so children also experience similar reactions when they don't get enough sleep, except that also impacts their thinking. So their cognitive processing may be much more difficult or slower as a result of lack of sleep. Children may exhibit more difficulties with following directions or following rules because of inadequate sleep. And then they also may be more likely to be irritable, which could result in behavior difficulties, such as aggression. So my first tip that I wanted to talk about is really the importance of a sleep routine. And so I think it is necessary that you establish a sleep routine for your child. Obviously, based upon sort of what I discussed, the first part of that routine is making sure that your child gets enough sleep based upon their age. And so identifying a bedtime that is going to provide sufficient amount of time for that child to get adequate rest, so that can reduce the likelihood that they may have some behavior issues. And so when we talk about sleep routine, the first part of that is making sure that the bedtime is consistent. And so you don't want to, have them go to bed, let's say 7 o'clock. Maybe that is a little bit too early, but 7 or 8 o'clock at night, during the week, but then on the weekends, they go to bed at 10 o'clock. You want to try to be consistent with that bedtime every day of the week. And I know that that can be difficult sometimes for kids because it's the weekend and they want to stay up a little bit later. but you want to encourage sort of this consistency because that's going to help reduce the likelihood that you're going to be changing up sort of their sleep patterns throughout the week. So there can be some difficulties with adjusting from, weekend sleep schedule to week day sleep schedule. So really try to be consistent in terms of their sleep routine set so that they do go to bed the same time every day of the week. And then for some kids, there may be some difficulties with sleep onset or going to bed. And so try to create sort of a routine in terms of activities, whether that's, bathing, brushing your teeth, reading a book, quiet time, meditation, whatever the activity is that is calming, so that way it helps the child to be able to get to sleep a little bit easier. The second tip that I want to talk about is the importance of consistency. And so outside of consistent sleep, it's also important to be consistent in terms of how you respond to different types of behaviors. And so I think it can be definitely challenging sometimes when parents respond to kids differently in terms of managing behavior. And this is something that I've experienced often as a psychologist working with families, is that mom and dad respond very differently to the child when they misbehave or they break a rule. And so one thing that I oftentimes talk about with families is that it's really important that as a unit, you decide how are you both going to respond to that child's behavior. And as I mentioned before, if mom and dad live in separate homes, or parents are separated or divorced, it's still important that you are consistent. And I know that that can be really difficult, but it's necessary that the child begins to learn expectations. And so being consistent helps to reinforce what is expected for that child. And so remember to sort of keep that in mind in terms of managing behavior difficulties. The third tip that I want to talk about is being able to reward desired behavior. And I'm very specific in saying desired behavior as opposed to like bad behavior or acceptable behavior, because for every family, there are different expectations that you may have for your child. And so I think it is important that you are very clear with your child about what those desired behaviors are, and that you are specific in terms of how you reward or reinforce those behaviors. And so one of the things that is helpful that I won't spend a lot of time about today is using behavior charts or reward systems as a way to reward or reinforce desired behavior. And so if you go to the website, you will see that there is a tab on parenting tools. One of those tools that's listed there is a link to a website that has a number of different resources about different types of behavior charts or behavior modification plans that may be helpful for you to really get specific about what are some of the challenges and issues that you may be dealing with your own child, and how you can use those behavior charts as a way to reward your child for the desired behavior. So desired behaviors may include, doing chores around the house. It may mean, keeping your hands to yourself, so not engaging in aggressive behaviors. It may include using nice words, or for kids that have difficulties with profanity or cursing, you want to reward them for using appropriate language. It may be sharing with their siblings, or sharing with kids in their neighborhood if they're playing with different toys. So those are the different types of desired behaviors that you want to specify and really be specific about with your child, so that they know this is what's expected of me. And one thing that I often talk about with parents is that when we talk about reinforcing or rewarding desired behavior, try to avoid using punishment as much as possible. And I know that punishment and sort of discipline is something that we think about a lot. And I'm not saying that you should not discipline your child, but I think when we talk about punishment, things like spanking, which we can sort of get into a little bit of controversy about using spanking as a behavior or parenting technique. But what we know from the research is that spanking doesn't have long-term effects in terms of improving or reducing behavior. So it may temporarily show some decreases in that child behavior, but over time that behavior is more than likely going to return. So I always encourage parents to really think about trying to use positive reinforcement or rewards more often than they do in terms of using punishment types of strategies. And again, that is something that a trained psychologist or licensed child therapist can be able to help you with in terms of thinking about what are some of the rewards that may be most useful for your specific child. Because I have had clients where families feel like they've tried to use like a sticker chart or behavior chart, and it hasn't been effective. And so it may be helpful to sort of talk through that with the therapist as well, that can be able to sort of explore with you and with your family about what have been some of the pitfalls or why that specific strategy didn't work. And then as I'm looking at the time here, the last strategy that I want to talk about is avoid giving attention to undesired behavior. And so this can be challenging at times because for some parents, they inadvertently or unintentionally give attention to behaviors that they don't want to see. And so when I talk about giving attention to undesired behaviors, that is, if a kid is having a temper tantrum, let's say at home or in the store, that your way of responding to that is constantly saying, get up off of the floor, don't do that, this is not the way to behave. And so for kids that may in some ways like attention from their parent, whether that's positive or negative attention, that is reinforcing to them. And so you do want to be careful to not give attention to some of those behaviors that you don't want to see. And so one thing that I want to sort of briefly go back to that I meant to discuss earlier is when we talk about giving attention to undesired behaviors, for some kids, there are functions, as we call them in psychology, about why the child is behaving that way. Or we can use a different term to say, what are some of the reasons why the child may behave that way? And so I want to sort of briefly pull up this little diagram here that talks about what are some of the functions of behavior. And again, this is a way to think about why certain children may behave in certain ways in the context of this, thinking about a child misbehaving. And so if we look at this here, and I'm not sure how well you can see this, I will try to remember to also share some of these on the Instagram page. So if you're not following on Instagram, definitely visit the Instagram page at Therapy for Black Kids, and I will post some of these resources so that you can be able to utilize those to refer back to. So just to sort of look at this a little bit, in terms of sensory things, for some kids, they like physical touch, and that may be things like hugs. And so if a child is misbehaving and maybe you decide that now you're going to give your child a hug in that situation, that actually may be reinforcing to them, and you're giving attention to undesired behavior, which is, misbehaving or having a temper tantrum. So again, just sort of think about, for your child, there are different reasons why they respond certain ways. And so just sort of pay attention to those. And again, a trained therapist or psychologist can help you to sort of identify what may be some of the specific functions of those behaviors that your child may be exhibiting. A common function that often comes up is escape. And so for some kids, they engage in misbehavior or behavior issues because they don't want to do something. And by engaging in this disruptive behavior, then that allows them to get away with doing that activity. And so you want to sort of monitor if that may be contributing to why your child is continuing to have these behavior problems, because every time that they have a temper tantrum, or every time that they engage in refusing picking up their toys or cleaning their room, they're allowed to not do that, and maybe you decide to like give up if it's a temper tantrum, or if it's picking up their toys, then you decide that you're just going to do it yourself because it's easier that way. And so that may be contributing to giving attention and reinforcing undesired behaviors. I've talked about attention already, so I won't spend much time there, but obviously kids behave in ways that they like attention from adults, peers, or others in different social situations. And then finally, kids may engage in misbehavior because of wanting to receive something. So something tangible. That can be, a favorite snack, a toy, being able to play video games. All of those things may be contributing to some behavior challenges as well. And so these are helpful things to sort of keep in mind as you try to understand what may be contributing to why your child may be having some behavior difficulties. And so as I begin to close out, I wanted to remind people again that if you are new to Therapy for Black Kids, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. This is the first live event that is being hosted, but there are a couple of audio sort of podcast clips on the page already, and more videos and content will be coming soon. So if you subscribe to the page, that way when information is released, it will be automatically emailed to you. So be sure to subscribe, share the video with people that you know that may benefit from the content that I discussed today, and also invite them to subscribe to the YouTube page as well. So as I get ready to close out, if you do have any questions, as I mentioned before, I'm happy to answer those questions on the live. The video will be posted and shared here today. I also received a couple of questions via email earlier this week that I posted on the Instagram page. So again, if you're on Instagram, be sure to follow there as well at Therapy for Black Kids. Oftentimes on the Instagram page, I will share information there that it's not on our other social media platforms. And so if you go to Instagram, you can be able to like the page. You can also check out our Facebook page and our Twitter page as well, if you want to follow us on all of these social media platforms. So one of the questions that I received via email here was from a parent that said, what happens, or how should you deal with behavior problems if the child seems to be fine at home, but then they are noticing that they're having problems more at school? And so this is something that I've sort of dealt with before, in that there can be times where teachers or even kids in the classroom, again, going back to those functions related to attention, some kids engage in behaviors because it makes their peers laugh in the classroom. And other times it may be that the teacher may be reinforcing, undesired behaviors in that situation as well. So I think my first recommendation is that schools are required to offer assistance and services to children that may be experiencing difficulties. And so I would say that as a parent, you should request that the school has a meeting, which is called different terms at certain schools. But if you can request to have a meeting with the teacher and the child study team, for example, they can be able to discuss what may be some of the challenges with their child and how to manage and improve those behaviors. And oftentimes there is a school psychologist that may be on staff as well as part of that team that can be helpful. So I would say reach out to your school if those types of challenges or difficulties sort of arise. So I don't see any questions here on the YouTube page for the live. So I want to again thank all of you for joining today. The video will be saved on the page, so feel free to share the video with your friends and family members that may benefit from this. And if you are a therapist or counselor, definitely recommend the video if it's helpful to your parents or your clients that you work with around sort of behavior issues. So thank you for joining today. Again, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and also follow us on Instagram at Therapy for Black Kids.